Okay, picking up from last time, as you remember, we had read in the book dealing with the light reactions, and from last week, the Kelvin cycle was explained to yourself in what we call the dark reactions. And one thing to keep in mind, the end result is how these organisms or plants continue to produce ATP. And when that compound gets broke down, that's what supplies the energy. And remember, in animals and humans, that takes place in the mitochondria when again, that compound ATP is produced and then broken down. One of the aspects that you will learn in cellular respiration today is that how animals and humans take this compound, our basic building block of sugar, and that gets broke down into um, produce energy for us in the form of ATP. Now, one of the things that you will learn is one deals with whether enough oxygen is present, and that's known as respiration, or aerobic respiration, and if there's not enough, you'll be dealing with anaerobic respiration. Anyway, back to these plants. Remember, we are reading about why these plants are green in color, and the definition of that color is since they're green, these plants reflect every color but green. And that's how we see that associated color. Okay. So, and that's what we just talked about. As plants are green, all their colors are absorbed. Green is then reflected. Okay. And one of the aspects to remember is I would venture to think that within the next couple weeks, especially if it's going to get cold, today is kind of an exception where we have this south wind and it's going to be somewhere in the upper 70s or lower 80s. And you'll notice that probably when you stepped outside right away this morning how humid it was. And the idea that with that, we're going to drop probably a good 20, 25 degrees in just more than one day. And when that happens, we see during the fall, many of the plants lose their chlorophylls. In other words, the idea that the amount of green pigment being produced begins to diminish, and then we start to see that these leaves takes on these different types of colors. Some will start to turn red, yellow, and for some people that's some of their maybe favorite times of the year, just because of I see the cottonwoods as I look north out of our window. Some of them are starting to turn a little yellow, and that'll become more prevalent as we move further down the road here in the fall. Okay? So the big take-home idea with that of the light reaction is going to be something called the electron transport chain. And as what we see happening is as this sunlight is absorbed, this electron then gets pushed along, which what you would guess is a chain. And we eventually get to that here in just a moment. Okay, so in step one, we're seeing that these electrons enter a higher level in the chlorophyll A as they become excited because of absorbing of that UV light. Then in step two, okay, the acceptor of the electrons lost from the chlorophyll is called a primary electron acceptor. And one of the aspects that we'll talk about probably later on this week to wrap this chapter up is that final electron acceptor then comes from water. Okay? The reason we say that is that in step three, okay, electron transport chain takes place in step three as a molecule of water is split and the hydrogen ion moves down the thylakoid. Okay? Because you remember, we're talking about electrons here, so that's pushing that negative charge and the hydrogen just follows right along. So step four is where the reduction occurs because of the movement of the electrons. Okay? And again, remember, the hydrogen is following these electrons, and that comes from this water being split. Okay? And what we mean by reduction, for those of you who go on to take higher levels of chemistry, parts of that includes what we call oxidation and reduction reactions. In this case, we call it a reduction because notice this water had split, and this hydrogen ion is moving down the thylakoid membrane because of this electron transport chain. That water gets split, you got some hydrogen that gets pushed along and pulled along because of this electron transport chain. So, in this reduction then, notice we got this NADP, which is showing a positive sign. This compound has a positive charge, so then in this reduction reaction, we're adding another hydrogen, which includes that electron, so then that's what we see, the positive charge then disappear. So that's what we mean by reduction. So probably the biggest thing to keep in mind here is that sunlight is absorbed, water is split, and when that happens, the electron transport chain pulls that hydrogen ion along, so then this compound then can get reduced from NADP with the positive charges reduced to NADPH. Okay, so and the end result, whether we're talking about the light reactions or we're talking about the Kelvin cycle, is the production of ATP. With the light reactions, of course, that happens with the split of water, and with the dark reactions, it comes from carbon fixation. Again, the end result, the biggest thing to keep in mind is that the production of ATP is what these plants are trying to accomplish. Okay, we will have you discuss cellular respiration later on today with Mr. Hoth, as we are gone to Del Rapids for our second cross-country meet in that town. And then you'll notice when you look at the board on Wednesday, you won't have class on that day because that's our own home invite. So I do believe you'll be, dismissed for that. So plan on watching this video, for those of you who choose to, and talking about cellular respiration. We combine the movement of cellular materials, which was chapter 5. We combine that with chapter 6, and then a little bit of chapter 7 covering cellular respiration. So we will catch up to you next time.